The universe isn't always kind to our fantasy football assets, and progression is rarely linear, right? Which means that plenty of IDP options are coming off disappointing seasons, whether due to injuries, inefficiency, unideal usage, or just being on the wrong side of variance. There are several reasons why players can have down seasons, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's only downhill from here. I'm John Macri, and on this episode of the PFF Fantasy Podcast IDP edition, we'll be going through the top IDP bounce-back candidates for the 2025 season. So let's get it. All right. I, for one, really enjoy this topic because not only does it mean that we get to dive into players who IDP gamers might be down on after last season and, create some reasons for optimism, but it also means that I get to talk to one of the brightest minds in the world of IDP. Joining me to talk IDP bounce backs once again from footballguys.com, the legendary Dynasty Tripp. Tripp, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, bud. I appreciate the kind words and about hopefully I'm a legend and beyond my own mind. So I appreciate that very much. It's good to see you. Great to talk football. We're in the lull here between OTAs and training camp, and so lots of time to gear up for a great season.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely the quiet time. Although the NFL, it's never completely gone away. The NFL always finds a way to get their way into the news cycle at some point throughout the week with a new story. But yeah, before training camp starts, this is kind of our time to kind of a little bit looking back on last year, projecting forward for 2025, and that's kind of what we like to do here. And we've done this for a few years now, right? Trying to
Yep.
identify
Mm-hmm.
kind of the guys who had shit seasons the previous year and kind of give reasons as to why that isn't going to be their new norm and why they can have a better season going forward. And that's what we're going to do here for 2025 as well, and give reasons that we'll get into and ones that might be different for each player as well. So I always enjoyed that aspect of it as well, just finding the silver lining in all these players down seasons and becoming hopeful that we could get something better this year. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So we'll get right into it. There are going to be some players, or at least one very obvious one who I intentionally left off like our main list here, and that's Aiden Hutchinson. Just very quickly, because I think maybe the most obvious candidate that I've been pumping his tires for so much already this off season that we don't need any more of that, but I did figure I'd just mention him here just in case anyone felt like I intentionally left him off the list or anything like that. So yes, Hutch, I would absolutely consider a bounce back candidate. But for this episode, we want to dive a little deeper to find some less obvious names, Tripp. So let's get into those guys now and start with the defensive linemen. And your first picks here are a twofer with both of the new Minnesota Vikings defensive tackles, Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. What do you like about Minnesota's newest signings for the interior of their defensive line?
Well, first of all, I just think it's fascinating that Minnesota had just such a tremendous showing on defense last year. And they did it in part with just a motley crew of defensive tackles with Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard. And, I don't even think Jonathan Bullard's caught on a roster just yet. I could be wrong about that. But they go on ahead and bring in John Allen and Javon Hargrave, who are now in their 30s, but have had some really bright moments in their careers. And they're being paid pretty well to come in here and contribute to this defense. And so the one thing about the Vikings defense is that Brian Flores has provided opportunities for defensive tackles to compile huge tackle numbers. And John Allen in particular for 5 years in a row had tackle totals over 60. And so I think he has great promise to come in and do and produce similar results here in this defense. And so the next question is, does he recover some of the sack production that he's had in years past? Because he certainly had a down year last year, which is why he's a bounce back candidate. So I like him. I think he's a good player. I can't really explain kind of where he's been the last couple of years. I mean, it's not been ideal, I certainly admit. Hargrave, I think, is in the same boat. I guess I was a little bit more worried about him, and maybe I would take the Vikings cue that he's the lower paid of the two, but he's also 2 years older, and he's lost a couple of years now to being banged up. And so you got to wonder if those injuries are starting to pile up at all. But nevertheless, I mean, these are guys that I don't think are particularly expensive in drafts. They're guys that are not being drafted as DT1s, and I think that they both have the possibility of having a DT1 season, particularly Allen, in my opinion, just because of the history of tackle production. And then also he's been a productive pass rusher in the past too. And with the way that the Vikings were able to collect sacks with Hargrave and Grenard, not Hargrave, but Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard last year on the edges. I just think that they have a pretty frightening pass rush right now. So I'm excited about both of these guys' potential in this defense. With having to pick between the two, I'd choose Allen. But if I was sitting there the last pick of my draft in a league that requires 2 defensive tackle starters, I'd be happy with Hargrave on that roster also.
Yeah, you're right. Like these are definitely guys that we've seen be relevant for IDP before and be really effective both as pass rushers and tacklers for, like you said, specifically for Allen. And what I like about this is that the Vikings are obviously believers in these guys as bounce backs in 2025 as well. Right now, obviously they, like you said, they're on a bit on the older side and they're both coming off these injuries that shorten their 2024 seasons, but they have a history of being two of the best players at their position. And I think it's important to note that them getting back to that level of being among the best at their position in terms of like PFF grades and stuff like that, maybe not as possible, but more so the bounce back to being quality IDP starters for us in those DT required formats, I think is the most important. And like you said, they can be had for nothing at this point in the offseason, whether through the draft or via trade or hell, maybe even on waivers, right? So I'm with you. There's potential here for both of these guys in Brian Flores' defense, which does a great job, like you said, generating tackles towards the middle of the defensive line, but also generating pressure as well. And they've been in need of some pass rush upside along the interior of that defensive line. So there's potential there. And just because these guys are older, we don't necessarily need to write them off either, right? Like you just look at what Cam Hayward did from 2023 to 2024, right? I think he would have been very easy to write off heading into last year. And he goes out and puts together just a monster season at 35, 36 years old, whatever it was. And I'm not even saying that we should expect that because that was obviously unreal for Hayward, but at least we have, a very recent sample of an older defensive tackle who was banged up the year prior and looked about done and then delivered a great season. So a couple of guys like Hargrave and Allen, who are also very talented, hold that bounce back potential in them for sure. So those are kind of our defensive tackles, Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. So both of them on the Minnesota Vikings. And funny enough, Tripp, is that our first two edge defenders that we'll talk about both come from the Miami Dolphins. So I'll start with my pick here, and that is Bradley Chubb. So he didn't play at all in 2024. So this is, feels like an easy pick for like a bounce back because anything that he does this year will be better than 2024. But I'm not trying to set the bar that low either. Instead, I'm looking at Chubb and what he accomplished in 2023 prior to his injury. That's what I'm trying to get closer to in 2025. So I have the numbers up on the screen there from 2023, and they're really, really strong, like 93rd percentile in expected sacks, top 15 overall PFF grade and PFF pass rush grade. He was the edge 6 overall in IDP, and then even 95th percentile in tackles versus expected that year. So he was operating at an elite level. So coming off injury, especially in that first season, it is never easy, and it's going to maybe take a minute to get back up to speed for most players. But where I guess I'm concerned less about that with Chubb is that he's had a much longer time off to recover because they didn't bring him back at all in 2024 since their season was basically in the shitter. So he's well over a year removed from this injury and is, I think, much more likely to hit the ground running and look better than most coming off an injury. And after that first full season in Miami in 2023, which was a career year for him, by the way, like both in pass rush grade, overall grade, total pressures as well, all that good stuff. So if he comes close to that, I think we're looking at a guy who we can draft as like, in that edge 3 or later range this offseason, but can return some consistent edge 2 production for us, even with Robinson there and Jaelan Phillips coming back as well. I don't think there will be the health concerns to start the season for Chubb. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go back to that workhorse role in 2025, like he was in 2023. But what do you think, Tripp? How are you feeling about Chubb for this season?
Well, I think both of these edges are important to talk about. I think normally when we do this in years past, we've avoided guys that were coming off of injuries because, like Aiden Hutchinson being an example of a guy where we know he's a good player. We're guessing that people aren't tuning into a podcast because they need to be told that Aiden Hutchinson is a bounce back player. But I think with Bradley Chubb, I think it's a good call to put him on here because I think people may not necessarily be on board with him. He has in the past, earlier in his career when he was with Denver, played really well, then suffered an ACL and taken a long while to get back to form. So I think this is an interesting case too, to consider. So yeah, I think there's real potential. I mean, like you were saying, he was just so effective in 2023. Really, probably the best year of his career. I would think the best year of his career, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And so here he is. He's only 29. It feels like he's been in the league for a while because he's been drafted in 2018. Not that old, right? I mean, we talked about 30 being kind of old, but a lot, there was a while there where pass rushers were routinely peaking in their 30s. I think what Garrett's 29 and Watt's 30. So it's like, it may be old for running back, but it's not old for pass rushers. So you're less worried on that front too. So yeah, just the battery of guys they have on the edge is pretty interesting. It makes me wonder, just thinking out loud here, if they're going to figure out ways to get all three of these guys in the field so that you don't have the snap concern.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely going to be some packages where if all three of these guys are healthy, obviously Chop Robinson, Jaelan Phillips, Bradley Chubb, like they can put together a really nice pass rush package with those three guys. I worry a little bit that it gets a little crowded for if all three are healthy. There's going to be
Mhm.
somebody that loses snaps, right? And
Yep.
we'll see who that ends up being. I have some concerns that it might be the younger Chop Robinson who may be more of a designated pass rusher. We'll see, but yeah, let's talk
Mhm.
about the second edge defender coming off a injury here, and your pick here to bounce back in 2025. Trip Jaelan Phillips. I'm really hopeful here as well, Trip. So looking forward to kind of hearing your thoughts on what we could get from Jaelan in 2025.
Well, this guy is a guy that we're looking to bounce back from a couple of years of not
Yeah,
being all that productive is the thing. And I think that it really has to do entirely with the injury. People are just flat out on him because he came into the league with injury concerns. It was said that he almost retired from football as a collegian when he was at UCLA and then ended up or is it Miami, Florida? I can't remember which was which, but he was at both Miami, Florida Hurricanes and then also at UCLA. And he, after quitting one program, he went to the other, regathered himself, and got his career back on track. Was a first round pick, but then and played okay as a rookie, and they got in there as a third pass rusher, and then really blossomed in his second year. And so he played full seasons both of those years. It's he people say he quote can't stay healthy. Well, he stayed healthy for 2 straight years, and then he got hurt in
mhm.
2023, and then there's some data out there that suggests that you get hurt once like that and you have a higher percentage chance of getting hurt again. And so he did get hurt again in 2024. But I was noticing that he's almost on like a Keenan Allen like track. Keenan Allen had 2 healthy years as rookie and second year player, and then missed his third and fourth seasons, most of his third and fourth seasons, a lot like Phillips did. And people wrote that guy off. I remember back in 2017,
Oh yeah.
I had drafted John Ross and Joe Williams with picks. I wasn't very happy about it. And so I traded him for Keenan Allen, and I got freaking lit up in the chat. That was a stupid trade. Well, it worked out okay.
Yeah.
you know, and so I think it. So I think the people. I mean, I can't tell you or promise you that Jaelan Phillips is that his injuries are not going to be an ongoing problem. But I just the level of concern over the term quote injury prone is just over the top. You get a guy that's this talented, that has both in this defense, both high tackle floor, good sack upside. assuming he gets enough snaps, like we talked about a minute ago. But just the idea that you should just, I mean, he's almost not being drafted. I checked the Fast Draft Fantasy app ADP before we came on here, and he barely ever gets drafted. I mean, the percentage of
Mhm.
leagues he's getting drafted in is like 14% of the leagues. This is a guy, I think, that a year or two ago, you would have been happy to get him as, as a DE2. And here's not even getting
Yeah.
drafted in these fast draft. I mean, that's just a tremendous discount. It's just a total overcorrection sheerly over this crazy phrase injury prone.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Like still have high hopes for Jaelan Phillips because, like you said, we've only really got like a glimpse of his potential so far in the NFL. With obviously the injuries in back-to-back seasons sapping a lot of the potential as of late. Like his 2022 season, you referenced it, was everything that we thought it could be coming out of college, and based on his profile coming out of college, where even though he didn't build on his high 8.5 sack total as a rookie, everything else that he did that year pointed to a top tier player at the position, where he played over 800 defensive snaps and he ranked 6th in overall PFF grade for his position. He was 6th in pass rush grade as well. He was top 20 in run defense grade. He also ranked 95th percentile in expected sacks that year and came in well below the expectation in terms of actual sacks. So I was very high on him heading into 2023 as not just like a positive regression candidate in the sack column, but just overall as an IDP. And if you look at the chart on the screen right now, you'll see the sacks were absolutely regressing positively in 2023, even though he missed time early in the year. He was like edge 4 in points per game because of the playing time, the tackling ability, and the sacks. And then we were robbed by that Achilles injury, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
probably came back a little early last year than he should have coming off the Achilles, and maybe that contributed to the injury. And yeah, I don't I don't think we should have been that surprised that he didn't look the same in 2024, and then obviously tore his damn ACL in the year in last year, which sucks, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I do worry about him this year, considering the injury history and recovering time, that maybe not right out the gate. He's not that starting IDP option for us, but I do expect him to get back out there and play enough that it isn't impossible that he goes back to that kind of high end IDP range again. And look, we talked about a Chubb and Phillips. They're both on this list. It is kind of the reason that I'm a little bit lower than consensus, most likely, on Chop Robinson for 2025 redraft, because those two are more of your kind of workhorse edges, where if they're out there, there might not be enough meat on the bone for Chop outside of being a designated pass rusher, which I
Mm-hmm.
think he could be very good at in year two. I just worry that it leads to less consistency for IDP production for like someone like Chop Robinson. But we'll see how these two look coming off of injury, obviously. But yeah, I'm hopeful for this. All three of these Miami edge defenders here for
Mm-hmm.
even the next few years here. I think there's still some juice left for all three of them.
Well, I just hope that they find a quarterback, and maybe I should suit up for them.
Yeah. Jalen Ramsey, yeah, still hanging around on the team, but it doesn't seem like he's bound to be there for long.
Yeah,
So,
that's frightening.
yeah. But Tripp, let's move on to another one of your bounce back candidates along the defensive line. Our last edge for today, it's Montez Sweat of the Chicago Bears, who did not miss significant time last year due to injury, but he did have an overall down year in general, both for IDP and in NFL terms. So, what's got you optimistic about Sweat heading into 2025?
Well, I've thought Sweat was interesting for a while. When he was drafted in the first round back in 2019. He was considered by some teams to have top 10 pick upside, but he fell a bit because of medicals. And he comes in and was part of a battery in Washington for a few years, and then really seemed to come into his own in that first. And that right when he went to Chicago in the second half of 2023, and I wasn't optimistic about that landing spot, just in part because of the cast around him. But he had 6 sacks in his first 6 games with Chicago, and really looked effective in that 4-3 defense there that Matt Eberflus was running. And then in 2024, yeah, he had a down year for sure. But the first half of the year wasn't terrible. He had an ankle injury early on in the season, and then had a shin injury in week 8, which cost him week 9. And he just never seemed to be right after that. Had only 2 sacks after that point. And there was even speculation in Chicago that he wasn't playing 100% effort. But I think that the defense in the last 2 years that the Sweat has been there, the coaching staff and the turmoil, and I think that has affected a lot of things. And so, there was theory that that as the team was kind of playing out the string there, that Eberflus might have been losing the locker room. So I think that Sweat is as bounce back candidate, both as a player and also as just kind of in his head, quite possibly. It's hard to know these things, of course, but I think there are reasons to believe that he was not performing up to his full ability, both because of just not quite healthy, and then also the team context around him. So I also like him in Dennis Allen's defense. Dennis Allen has had defensive tackles such as Cam Jordan and Carl Granderson collecting big tackle totals. So this is a little like the Minnesota argument, where Flores had D tackles collecting 60, 70 tackles a season, and Dennis Allen has had edges collecting 60, 70 tackles a season in his defense. And so I like that upside too. Sweat, I think, looks solid playing a heavy technique from from the edge of the defense. And so I think he's a versatile player that has good opportunity for a high floor of tackles. Add to the fact that who they actually have behind him. They signed Deo Odengbo, which was puzzling to me, but he's a starter along with Sweat. And then behind him, they got a couple of guys that are in their rookie contracts that were late round picks, Austin Booker and Dominique Robinson, unless they add somebody here. So there's a chance that Sweat plays 900 snaps in this defense. I mean, not a high chance, but there's a chance, unless they sign somebody here. And so I just think that just playing time alone could get him the tackles that he needs. And he doesn't need more. He doesn't need but 10 sacks if he has 75 tackles to really be a strong edge player here. And again, this is a guy that's going to be not expensive, that you can, I think, get edge 2 numbers out of pretty comfortably if the things go the way I think they will.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's definitely possible here for Sweat. Like last year, it was definitely rough, right? Like especially considering that the expectation for him in like his first full season with the Bears was a pretty optimistic one. I think coming into the year, like he was a better pass rusher in 2023 once he got to Chicago from Washington. So it wasn't like illogical to think that he could build on that in 2024. Instead, he kind of did the opposite of that is the whole team really kind of faltered and I think performed below expectations last season. So we saw him post the lowest pass rush grade of his career since 2021, his lowest sack total as well. His second lowest snap total of his career as well. So I agree. There's still some potential in Sweat to say that he's definitely better than what he was in 2024, and maybe those injuries that had him banged up did contribute to again the playing time and just his overall ability to produce as a pass rusher. But new coaching staff, maybe they could bring that out in him because if not, what we got last year, it's obviously not going to be good enough for IDP. He was like edge 62 in points per game and he middling PFF grades across the board. So we've seen the better version of Sweat and we've seen it more than once. So I can get behind him potentially bouncing back this season for sure. Okay, so those are our DL bounce back candidates, but let's talk some linebackers now. And I want to start with the former back to back LB1 overall prior to a down year in 2024, and that is Foyesade Oluokun of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I've talked about this one on here before, but I think it must have been maybe the Dynasty linebackers episode most recently. But Foye was misused in Ryan Nielsen's defense last season, so much so that it was I think a massive detriment to his tackle potential. Like first, it started in September with Nielsen kind of pulling Foye off the field for like entire drives in each game. And it wasn't a ton of snaps lost, but it was enough that he basically immediately fell out of that LB1 range, right? Which was where he was being drafted last offseason, I would say 100% of the time within the top 12 linebackers. So right away, that killed some value for him. Then he got injured, went on IR for 4 games. That hurt his value even more. Then when he got back, he rotated off the field less, which was great, but he started playing much more on the edge and like the defensive line for a few weeks in a row. So that was another killer to his tackle efficiency. And it's not like, he was even rushing the passer in that position either to maybe get some of that big play potential. He was just there lining up across from an immediate blocker, and that kept him from getting those freed up tackles and everything, that we hate for our linebackers last happened basically to Foye last year. So thankfully, Ryan Nielsen, he was fired, and he will hopefully, will not have to deal with that this season. Now, Anthony Campanelli comes in as the new defensive coordinator. He was formerly the linebacker coach with the Green Bay Packers. So it's not really a trustworthy way to project what his defensive scheme will look like this year. But I have faith that at least Foye's usage won't be anywhere near as bad as it was last year with Nielsen calling the shots. So for me, that's kind of the reason I'm absolutely expecting a much better season for Foye in 2025. Even if he's not the overall LB1 again for like the fourth time, he should at least be in a much better position, I think, to finish as a top 12 linebacker again. And that's where I have him ranked heading into this season, because I think we can feel more confident in Foye than last year would have us believe with this scheme change here, because that was an absolute killer for him last season. But where are you at with Foye and maybe this defense as a whole? Any thoughts on Anthony Campanelli's scheme coming out of Green Bay?
Well, I think it'd certainly be an improvement for Oluokun versus Nielsen's scheme. That was such a bizarre situation to me for
Yeah.
Nielsen. Really, it's almost was unfair. He had nothing to work with at corner. Tyson
Mhm.
Campbell was hurt for most of the season. He's the only NFL caliber cornerback they had, and he's more of a zone guy anyway. And Nielsen is known for running man two. The guy ran more man two than almost all the rest of the teams combined. And then they don't put the corners on the team together. So it was like a dead the water situation for Nielsen.
Yeah.
And so he gets these linebackers, and he's just, I think it was predictable that Oluokun would. I mean, I did predict it that Oluokun would not be would suffer in the defense just because of just the scheme in general. But some of the other things with the edge lining up and the rotation was even more surprising than just the fact that his tackle efficiency declined. So, just if he could just simply play full time in the middle, then that would remedy a lot of this, right? And so I haven't seen anything suggesting he won't do that this year. One thing I do wonder is that with Campanelli as the linebackers coach, is what we saw last year with Green Bay is there was really only one full time linebacker. So
Mhm.
is there a risk there? I suppose there is a slight risk, but I'm not a big Devin Lloyd fan, so I don't really worry about that. So yeah, I think Oluokun is a good bet to rebound and return to LB1 status this year.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I agree. Like, I think that looking at that Green Bay scheme last year, there was that only the one full time linebacker. I would assume, like, if I had to put money on it, I would say that would be Foye. Again, I'm with you. I'm not like the biggest Devin Lloyd believer. He hasn't really shown that he's worth that first round capital, and Oluokun at least has the experience. He's been an NFL starter for several years now, and he's been really effective in that role. And they've paid him to do that. And I think they even declined Lloyd's fifth year option as well. So it doesn't seem like they have a lot of faith in him. So if there was going to be somebody that rotates off the field, that I'd have to imagine that it would be Devin Lloyd in this system, if he even holds that role. But I have to feel like Foye is in a really safe spot. And like you said, if he's just playing that true off-ball linebacker role, I think that's going to be the biggest key for him to bounce back and be that tackle machine that he once was. And I don't know that he's being drafted as a top 12 linebacker anymore, because last year was so bad and it scared some people. But I definitely think he has that capability to get back to that range here in 2025. All right. Speaking of linebackers in a new defensive scheme, your first linebacker bounce back candidate could also be getting a fresh start here in 2025. You've gone with Pete Werner of the New Orleans Saints. What do you like about his 2025 outlook?
Well, first of all, I like the fact that they paid him at the beginning of last year. It expresses some confidence in him. Yes, there's been some changeover in the franchise, which puts a little damper on that feeling. But second of all, I like the change in scheme for his outlook. I think there has been this belief among fantasy gamers that Demario Davis and Pete Werner are both players that just are somehow bad tacklers for some reason. And it's because if you look at their tackle efficiencies over the lives of their careers, that's been generally low. But last year, because of injuries and after the departure of Dennis Allen, they played more zone, more too high, and you saw their tackle numbers recover. And so Demario Davis set a career high in tackles last year. He suffered in the big play column, in part because they played more conservatively, in part because the defense, the whole team wasn't as good. But Pete Werner has been an LB4 twice in his career, despite playing just 85% of the snaps. And I think he's a good bet to play more than that this year. I think Brandon Staley wants to come in and play some light boxes. That's going to require two linebackers in the box to help with the run game in those situations. And I think he's a good bet to play 90% of the snaps, and he'll play in a defense that shows plenty too high, that plays 80% of the time in zone. And I think Werner could have above average tackle efficiency in this scheme. I don't think anyone who watches football has ever questioned his ability to play the run defense and make tackles. The concern with him is, from Saints fans, has always been that he's not contributing as much in the big play category. And maybe there's some fairness to that, but that then again is the turnovers are, it's hard to predict those. And I'm not convinced that a linebacker's turnover production is as much as about skill as it is about being in the right place at the right time. So I don't know if Werner will be a great pass rusher, but I don't know that Brandon Staley would want that anyway. So I think that we're relying on a guy to come in and get 130 tackles. And I think there's some chance that Werner's able to do that and be a productive linebacker for somebody, for an IDP roster.
Yeah, like for guys like Werner, I'm with you in that. Like, I also start to feel like optimistic when a new defensive coordinator comes in, because we get hope that they'll get you know that we'll get better or maybe more consistent usage for these like typically part-time linebackers. And we'll see what happens with Brandon Staley. Like, he definitely has some weird taste in linebackers, though. Like, his final season with the Chargers, he was running one full-time linebacker between Kenneth Murray and Eric Kendricks, and I think the majority of us would expect that full-time role to go to Kendricks. But for Staley, Kenneth Murray was his guy for whatever reason. And hey, maybe he likes
Mhm.
Werner as his Kenneth Murray, and because of the age of Demario Davis, maybe he
Mhm.
moves him to the part-time role. Who knows? But that being said, like, Staley is weird. I have a hard time trusting him to do the right thing. So my projection for Werner, like, it's still around that kind of 80% snap range. But you're right in that we should maybe expect a little bit more of that just based on his scheme. And we should get at least a much higher rate of zone coverages with Staley compared to Dennis Allen as well, right? Staley last season with the Chargers, or his last season with the Chargers, he was at about 78% zone. You said like you're right on there, 80%.
Mhm.
Well, Allen last year with the Saints, he was only at 65% of zone coverage. So if Werner can get a nice boost with those zone snaps as far as his
Mhm.
tackle efficiency, as we know the data says that he can and will happen, then maybe he can make the most of that, even if it is a non-full-time role, and deliver a really solid season for
Mhm.
those deeper type leagues, like you said. So yeah, I'm not out on Werner by any means for those deeper leagues. I think there's still some potential here for sure.
Well, the other thing about Staley's last year there in LA is that he had Derwin James as a safety. And
Yeah.
so I think that to me is a factor. So the starters this year in New Orleans will be Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reed. The third safety right now looks like a rookie third rounder, Jonas Anchor. I don't have great concern that Sanker cuts significantly into Werner's snaps, at least certainly in year one. I mean, maybe Werner plays poorly, maybe Sanker breaks out. Those are risks I'm willing to take.
Yeah, Sanker, he's definitely more of that kind of box heavy safety for sure. But I'm with you. Like, year one, it's always hard to project these rookie safeties that to play a significant role. Where especially when you have an experienced linebacker like Pete Werner, who's performed pretty well. Not he's not amazing or anything, but he's solid and he's got some experience in the NFL. So I think that definitely gives him the edge over having a third safety come in and take him off the field. But we'll see how things go here. But yeah, you wrote up a really good piece as well on the New Orleans Saints defense over at Football Guys as well, going into a lot of detail on this defense and some of the projections for even the defensive line, defensive backs, the linebackers, everybody on the defense for IDP. So if people haven't checked that out yet, definitely go do that over at footballguys.com from Dynasty Tripp.
Thanks for the shout
Um,
out.
Oh, of course. It's good stuff. Okay, another player who I'm quite high on for this coming season, especially considering that he didn't really perform up to stuff last season, especially in terms of his PFF grades. That's Terrel Bernard of the Buffalo Bills, and he's the clear leader of the Bills linebacker room, in my opinion, right now. With Matt Milano taking a pay cut, especially, and Bernard getting that contract extension, and then Bernard playing ahead of Milano last season. This is kind of turned into Bernard's room now. And I think we can get an LB1 type season from him, because even last year, he missed some time due to injury, but he was at least LB24 in points per game when he was out there. But so many of his PFF grades were bad, especially in coverage. And I don't think he was nearly as effective as a tackler as he showed that he could be from back in 2023. And it's not like he was bad last year. So maybe I should hesitate a little bit in calling him a bounce back. But look, finished as an LB3 last year after being a top 5 linebacker in 2023. So there's absolutely room for him to get back closer to that 2023 form. Again, he wasn't a terrible tackler last year. He still ranked 80th percentile in tackles versus expected, but he was 89th percentile in tackles versus expected in 2023. So again, room for him to be back closer to what he was that first year when he emerged. And I think the confidence that the team has in him, giving him that extension this season, playing him ahead of Milano as well last year, he's the one that I think makes the most sense to me, who finished lower than the expectations last year. And we could see some, I think, positive variance in his favor to allow him to get back into that top 12 range for IDP. He's got to stay healthy, obviously. It's not like a huge concern. He's only missed a little bit of time, but that play, I think, a big part in him potentially returning some LB1 production this year, like he did in 2023. But where are you at with Bernard, Tripp? Because I realize he's not coming off the worst 2024 season, but for me, I just think his potential is so much more than what we saw last year based on that great 2023 season.
Yeah, well, like you said it, he was an LB3 last year. I mean, easily an LB2 this year. So yeah, I don't have. It's certainly a safe bounce back player. The coverage grade is kind of eye popping. Like,
Crazy.
what are we doing with that? So, but I don't know who they're going to put out there instead. I mean, is he really going to lose snaps? I mean, Milano's back, but Milano had his contract reduced to the point where he's basically on a 1-year deal now. So, it's interesting situation there in Buffalo on that front. So Dorian Williams is there. He collected a lot of tackles while he was out there. It's because he was getting picked on a lot in coverage. So yeah, I think that Bernard's safe in his role and projects as a solid bounce back candidate.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, look, the Bills, they brought in Shaq Thompson as well. He's another guy that's going to have to try to bounce back right from last year. He missed almost the entire season because of injury. He's been banged up quite a bit. Milano's been banged up quite a bit. So they have these guys that are going to have to probably step in just to fill in for injuries, but I don't think they're necessarily going to have to take Bernard off the field or anything like that, just as long as he's healthy, right? So, I got high hopes for Bernard this season, but let's move on to one of your picks here now. And honestly, one of the great names in the NFL, honestly, might be on my Mount Rushmore of great NFL names if I had to choose. I'm talking about Divine Deablo, now of the Atlanta Falcons. What do you like about El Deablo coming at getting a fresh start here in Hotlanta this season, Tripp?
I like that his dad just flat up owned up to the fact is, his last name is Deablo. So we had to offset that with the word divine. So, and then give a alliterative too, right? Divine Deablo. It's like, all right, respect that. So, it's a lot better story than Tyrod or Tyrod Taylor, a guy named after a car part. I don't know what to make of that. So, but Divine Deablo isn't a huge bounce back candidate, but he has been an LB4 in his past. And he's a guy that is just totally forgotten. And I guess it's because he goes to Atlanta. People know that Troy Anderson was there. I look at the part of the reason why people are out on him is because the Raiders just said, let's just let this guy walk. Okay, I get it. They also let their LB1 Robert Spillane walk, and Spillane wasn't bad last year. They're just going in a different direction. They took the Spillane was the dime linebacker in Pittsburgh for years before he got the full-time job in Las Vegas or Oakland, and then Deablo was a college safety at Virginia Tech before he landed out there and with the Raiders. And so they've replaced those guys with these traditional 2-down thumpers in Jermaine Pratt and Landon Roberts. And so I think that the Raiders are just going in a different direction with their defense as part of that explanation. Then you look at Deablo, and he's going to be paid $7 million a year this year. And it's not bad money. Caden Ellis is the LB1 there. He's going to make $7.25 million a year. So it communicates to me that he's clearly the LB2. I think you can often look at these contract numbers and see them tier out. For example, if you go to the CB numbers, the cornerbacks, there are literally 4 cornerbacks all making $18 million a year this year based on this contract they signed in March. These things tend to tier out, and Deablo squarely in that LB2 value. So I think that you've got Jeff Ulbrich coming in. He has obviously participated in the selection of Deablo. Ulbrich has taken college safeties, two of them before, and made them NFL linebackers. One of them being a guy that we talked about earlier tonight, Foyesade Oluokun. Ulbrich was the linebacker coach in Atlanta back when Oluokun got there. And the other guys, of course, Jamie and Sherwood, who enjoyed a breakout season with the Jets last year. So I think Deablo in Atlanta is probably a guy that plays a little less snaps. So if I was ranking Werner and Deablo, I'd rather have Werner. Deablo is probably doesn't have a whole lot of upside beyond 80% snaps, I wouldn't guess, with both Jordan Fuller and Xavier Watts playing at safety too. I think Deablo has potential to come in and contribute in this defense. It's a defense that's been relatively friendly to linebacker production for fantasy purposes in years past. I think that Anderson probably is clearly reserve, and that Deablo is a safe second starter. I don't think people are factoring that into their rankings and projections for their team building this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think one of the biggest things that in favor of Deablo, not just the contract, but Troy Anderson's just inability to stay healthy as well. Because yeah, Deablo, he's not necessarily at the forefront of like quality NFL starters, but he is maybe the best bet for the Falcons next to Caden Ellis. Because again, Anderson can't stay healthy. You got JD Bertrand, who's pretty inexperienced still, and even Jalen Walker, I think, is far from ready to take on like a starting role at off-ball linebacker, despite the first round capital, and that they maybe want him to play this hybrid role. I think he's still pretty raw there to play that position. So Deablo might just be in a good start to start this year with Ellis. That's how I have them treated in my rankings right now, giving that second linebacker spot for Atlanta to Deablo. Now, he's still not really, he's not quite an LB3 for me just yet, because I don't know if he'll, if it'll be a full-time role, and then like who knows what the grasp on that role might be, if Jalen Walker or Troy Anderson are able to show any kind of promise. But I mean, I think for week one heading into this season, I think it's Deablo for now. We'll see how the rest of the offseason goes, and who knows, because Jeff Ulbrich, like, he's the new defensive coordinator, like you said. He did run two full-time linebackers with the Jets last year. So there's at least some hope that he can, play a lot more than he did last year. Deablo, that is, as a rotational player behind Robert Spillane with the Raiders. And if that happens, like, he could be a huge value based on where he's getting drafted or not drafted, because there will be plenty of leagues that he gets overlooked. So definitely one to keep an eye on this season for sure. I like this call. All right, last linebacker on the bounce back list. I needed more reasons to talk about him anyways this season. So I'm glad that he fits this topic, because my last pick here at linebacker is none other than the legend Alex Singleton of the Denver Broncos. He is, I mean, the most efficient tackler in the NFL. He has been for several years now, and he was absolutely on pace to do it once again last year before he tore his ACL, and it was early on, so who knows if he would have got there. But in week 3 it was, which, by the way, he tore his ACL relatively early in that week 3 game, and then proceeded to not miss a single snap for the rest of the game, en route to a double-digit tackle performance, which maybe begs the question: do we even need our ACLs? But no, Singleton, he's ranked no worse than 99th percentile in tackles versus expected from 2021 to 2023. And then last year, before his injury, he ranked 99th percentile in tackles versus expected per game. And he still finished the year 83rd percentile in that regard, despite playing just 3 games. Usually players need more games to build on that number, but not His Royal Highness here, Mr. Singleton. So I fully expect Singleton to bounce back from the ACL injury and go back to just being a tackle vacuum. The guy is an absolute machine. Plus, the other linebacker that I had considered for this list was his teammate, Dre Greenlaw, also coming off injury, but he suffered another injury this offseason. It's like a quad injury or something like that, I believe. So Greenlaw could miss the start of the year again, so I had to take him off this list. But Singleton, like, I'm optimistic that he'll be good to go week 1, and if that happens, I imagine he'll go right back to his elite tackling ways, and I'm fine treating him as an LB2 heading into the year. But that's me. Where are you at with Singleton heading into 2025, Tripp?
Well, Ty J. Spears has joined the chat and says, no, we don't need our ACLs. So
Yeah,
I don't know if
exactly. There
that's
you
any
go.
consolation, Alex Singleton, but I'm looking at his contract and he's $1.3 million dead cap and 6.9 on the books. And that, there's not been any whisper I've heard about him falling off the roster or anything. And you've got, like you said, Dre Greenlaw banged up. Yeah, I don't think anybody can explain the tackles over expected for Singleton at this point. It's just
It's insane.
it's just one of those things we'll just take as gospel and we'll roll with it until we see otherwise. And so yeah, it's like why wouldn't you want Singleton as your LB2 at this point? And if he's coming at an injury discount, great.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like he's definitely not going to be drafted as the LB1 that I think he has the potential to be. And look, I'm not even saying that that's where he's going to finish, but I have full faith in this guy. There's no reason to doubt him at this point, even coming off injury. Like everything that he's done when he's on the field, the guy just continues to rack up tackles at an insane rate. So playing on that ACL last year in the game before getting surgery to repair it gives me at least hope that he should be one of the better I'd say in a better position to kind of bounce back from the injury this season, even if it takes a couple weeks. But I think we'll get a healthy Singleton again here in 2025.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to the safeties now, and we only have a couple of them because let's be honest, we don't like to get too optimistic about the defensive backs, but that doesn't mean that there weren't a couple. So Tripp, kick us off with your first pick here, Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Well, first guy, I just thought it's interesting to talk about. It's like this is guy. It's kind of a fascinating IDP case. Was it 3 or 4 years ago? He had 122 tackles. And everybody said, "Well, that's because he's so good." And of course, he hasn't even come close to that ever since. And then I think the next year he had a bunch of interceptions. People, well, that's because he's so good, and he's had one interception in the last 2 years. So does he suck? I don't think he sucks. I think he's a decent player. I think he's an interesting bounce back. I was one thing I noticed as I was looking through some of his game log is that there was exactly one game where he played the majority of his snaps in the box, and it was the only game that he collected 3 stops, which Pro Football Focus describes as a tackle that is a negative play for the offense. So no, we're not adding IDP fantasy points for stops, but I just think it shows that he is able to impact the game. And so what's different this year from last is that they had Devontae Kazee. He's fallen off the roster, and they replaced him with Juan Thornhill, the former Chief and Brown. And they have expressed that the purpose of bringing in Thornhill is to be a part-time center fielder, which is appealing to me. So that they'll have Fitzpatrick and Deshaun Elliott, who just signed a big contract, starting, and Thornhill is the third safety. I think there's an opportunity for both Fitzpatrick and Elliott to play closer to the line of scrimmage and to make some plays. And so the fact that Elliott has just gotten this contract maybe is just the exact kind of noise that you need to get Fitzpatrick at some kind of value. Now, I don't think there's a tremendous amount of upside here. I don't think he's going to get 122 tackles, but I think it's, he had by far and away his worst year in coverage by quarterback rating allowed last year. And I do think that was a bit of an anomaly. And I think with Thornhill coming in, that they're able to move Fitzpatrick around a little bit more. He's not required to play center field as much. I think there's an opportunity for him to bounce back, particularly on the passes defense category, and to make a few more plays near the line of scrimmage. So I'm not here to tell you that he is suddenly a top 5 safety as he's been in the past, but I do think there's an opportunity to get a playable safety, which he really wasn't playable last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I think, for me too, like one of the most impressive things I think about Fitzpatrick is that every year since 2021, he's performed above expectations in that tackle column, despite always playing more of like a deep safety role. He's always been an overly efficient tackler. Even in 2023, he played just 10 games and, he still performed over expected. And last season as well, he played just 18% of his snaps in the box, which is one of the lowest rates in the entire league, and he still delivered 93 total tackles. Where he got hurt, like you said, was kind of the lack of big plays, which has often come with what we typically get from him from an IDP standpoint. But last year, just 12% of his IDP production came from non-tackles. That's a number with, I think, the possibility of fluctuating more in his favor this season. And that alone could create a nice bounce back for him. So I would definitely not put it past him. And then, like you said, yeah, bringing Juan Thornhill in when they're going to run more three safety looks here, it definitely gives an opportunity for Fitzpatrick, who has, he has rotated down close to the line of scrimmage more so than he did last year in the past. And I think that's helped his tackle numbers a little bit more. And I'm optimistic about Deshaun Elliott this year as well, but I think Fitzpatrick could definitely be somebody that, we shouldn't write off just yet for sure. And then last one for today, I went with Jaquan Brisker of the Chicago Bears. So, man, Brisker, he was excellent last year when he was healthy, but unfortunately, that was only for like 5 games before he suffered a concussion and didn't return for the rest of the season. So that was pretty scary, obviously, because we see guys typically return after just a couple of games, usually at the most. But just like Chris Olave last year, like he got shut down for the entire season, so it was obviously pretty serious, right? So I am worried at least a little bit about re-injury there. But if he's healthy, which it sounds like he is right now, he's in I think a great spot to produce kind of safety one numbers. He was delivering around 16 points per game last year as the safety four. He was delivering 1.3 tackles above expected per game, which was 90th percentile for the position. He's been super efficient as a tackler since entering the league, so that's nothing new. He was 84th percentile in tackles versus expected as a rookie, 98th percentile in 2023. So I have been excited about his IDP potential for a few years, and that really just continues now that he's expected back in 2025. It'll be a different defense under Dennis Allen than previously, but the whole point of kind of the tackles versus expected formula is to identify the players who can outperform their deployments within those defenses and their situations and things like that. And Brisker stands out as one of the better bets to overcome the situation, even if the defense in and of itself doesn't necessarily project as strongly for like box heavy usage as years past for him. So I'm still high on Brisker, and I consider him one of the top safety options for IDP this season. But how are you feeling about him with a new defense, and then obviously the concussion issues as well?
Yeah, the concussion thing is just scary. I just
Yeah,
there's no way I don't know any way to be able to predict that's going how that's going to impact him. You said something
yeah.
which I thought was interesting though, is that you're not expecting a high box snap rate for Brisker this year.
Not necessarily that
Hmm.
it's not going to be high. I'm just looking at the defense in itself, and I could pull up the exact projection of what
Hmm.
Dennis Allen's defense was last year when it came to these guys and how they were kind of used. But um, I have it as, let's see, based on the usage for their safeties last year. So this is looking at kind of where these guys were lined up under Dennis Allen. So it would have been with the Saints safeties last year. Really, just average tackle efficiency is what we were kind
Hmm.
of getting as expected from that defense. So about 9.5% for the safety that was closest to the line of scrimmage, and 9.3% for
Hmm.
the other guy. So it was really kind of split there. That tells me that there's potentially some unideal usage within Dennis Allen's system.
Hmm.
But I mean, for Brisker specifically, like that's kind of where he thrives, right? He's not
Yeah.
really that deep safety. Like he
Right.
is that bigger box heavy type safety. So I think personnel dictates that a little bit. And that's why I've ranked him higher than where I have kind of the projection for the defense, because I think that's one
Mhm.
where we could see something more in his favor than what they've done in the past with Dennis Allen's Saints defense.
Yeah. Yeah, my thoughts are well, for one thing that struck me is when Brisker and when Matt Eberflus got to Chicago a couple of years ago, there was a discussion that Brisker and Byard would be used interchangeably. And then that didn't
Mhm.
really happen. Brisker was used majority. He was the preferred option close to the line of scrimmage. And it's because when he came in, there were people that were comping him to Jamal Adams. He was a guy that should thrive at that second level. And Byard is a veteran. He can play where you need him to play.
Yeah.
Thinking about the Saints is I look at Tyrann Mathieu, and both with Kansas City and then with New Orleans, that guy was like the least efficient box safety anybody's ever
Yeah.
seen. So
Yeah.
when I look at what Dennis Allen's going to do, I don't think that it's optimal usage, but I do think that
Mhm.
Brisker again has the opportunity to play close to the line of scrimmage more than Byard does. I do think it's it's not a enormously heavy one high defense, but I do think it leans some one high. So I think that I kind of like Brisker's setup, and I don't love it, but I
Yeah.
kind of like it. So I was interested to hear you had some concerns about the deployment there. It's like I don't dislike it all that much. So I'm optimistic about Brisker as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm with you. I think, yeah, just based on kind of how the deployment was last year, more
Mhm.
than anything, is that's how it kind of factored in a little bit. But it's true, like Tyrann Mathieu, he is absolutely played close to the line of scrimmage, and for whatever reason, the guy just cannot perform like strong like tackle numbers. So I don't know what that's about, but I if I had to bet on anybody being able to do that, I would say that Jaquan Brisker would be near the top of the list, and I think he should still get that strong usage near the line of scrimmage, and would be the one to rotate down more so than even Kevin Byard. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm yeah pretty optimistic for the most part.
Matthew must be the anti Singleton. That must be it.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. It definitely feels like it sometimes. There's a few players that are out there that I'm just like, how can this guy not get more tackle numbers? And
Yeah.
yeah, Tyrann Mathieu is one of the more frustrating ones for sure, because it definitely should be better, but
Mhm.
never seems to be the case. But there you have it. That is what, 9 IDP bounce back candidates for the 2025 season. But let us know who you're banking on for a rebound season. Shout them out in the YouTube comments. I'd love to hear them. And don't forget to like and subscribe while you're here. But Tripp, can't thank you enough for coming on and doing this every season with me, and getting optimistic about these players coming off of down years, and dropping your knowledge to back that optimism. So thank you for doing it again.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. I appreciate you having me on. I was curious if you wanted to do one bonus take.
Yeah, let's do it. Who do you got?
My bonus take is a guy that listeners might be hoping to hear and haven't heard, and that's Patrick Queen. And I'm totally out on Patrick Queen. I don't know about you, but I have this, like, I feel like that he could be like the next Blake Martinez slash Jaelan Smith, where he just goes poof.
Yeah. So, okay, hold on. I got a good Patrick Queen stat for you here, and I was going to tweet this out at some point, but I keep forgetting to do it. So, here are Patrick Queen's PFF grades with and without Roquan Smith on the field. So, with Roquan Smith on the field with him, he's played 1,743 snaps. He has a 77.8 defensive grade, 72.7 run defense grade, 77.8 coverage grade. Really, really strong numbers. Without Roquan Smith on the field with him, 3,523 snaps. He has a 40.2 defense grade, 38.0 run defense grade, and a 30.1 coverage grade, which are abysmal numbers. So this guy, for whatever reason, Roquan Smith was able to prop him up and make him a better player, but I I just don't get it. I haven't liked Patrick Queen. I think he's an inefficient tackler. He was somebody that I was low on heading into last year, and people were mad at me about him. He easily is an LB1. He's gonna do it. I like he's not. He's just not an efficient tackler. He never has been. He's been propped up by big plays, and obviously, his overall ability has been propped up a little bit by Roquan Smith as well, and then just being a first round draft pick. But I'm with you. I don't have high hopes for him. I like Peyton Wilson. I hope he takes over that role at some point. Again, he's another guy that maybe doesn't need ACLs or whatever, but we'll find out. But yeah, I think Patrick Queen, he is what he is at this point. He's kind of that low end LB2, more an LB3. So yeah,
And they
what,
signed
what,
Malik Harrison a $5 million
yeah,
contract, and he showed out fairly well. Now maybe he's because we're playing next to Roquan Smith. I don't know, but
right.
nevertheless, they paid him the money as though they want him to be a part-time LB2. And so they have Wilson, who has been practicing with the dot some in the offseason. They have Cole Holcomb, who has agreed to restructure. He's only on the books for like $1 million or $2 million this year.
Right.
And then so the fourth linebacker spot has been occupied by Mark Robinson for a couple of years. He is in the year 4 of his rookie deal. They may be ready to let go of him, but they drafted Carson Bruner with a 7th round pick as a developmental guy who might could play special teams. And so to me it's not likely, but I think it's possible that they hold on to Robinson or Bruner and let go of Queen, which would be a $3 million savings of cap. Now, the counter argument to that is they paid him $6.67 million roster bonus just last March. But still, it's like I look at the $3 million savings and I look at what they paid Malik Robinson. I think it's not outside the realm of possibilities that Queen does not make the team in August.
I like it. I mean, it's a good call. He's not that full time. Like he's not your team's LB1, right? He's just not
Mhm.
built to be that. He's not a wartime consigliere, right? That's not who he is. He's just he's much better suited for that LB2 rotational type role. And maybe, look, he's young enough. I guess he could develop and get better, but he's just not there right now. So I'm with you. I mean, based on where the Steelers could be this season, who knows? I don't think they're going to be in a great position to compete even with Aaron Rodgers. So maybe Queen does, end up on the cutting room floor here at some point. But yeah, it's a
Mhm.
good shout. It's definitely one to keep an eye on. I'll try to remember to tweet that stat out at some point. But anyways, that
Sounds good.
that was good, Trevor. That was a good.
Mhm.
Yeah, nice to bring that up. But yeah, before you do go, please let everybody know what you got going on over at Football Guys.
I've got my off-season series is called Reading the New Defense, and you mentioned it with New Orleans. The purpose of the column is to look at all of the new defensive coordinators that are taking over and to see how that might affect their IDP players' possibilities for the coming year, which I always find to be an interesting thing. I too often see the narratives out there that that they don't people don't think that it matters much what the scheme is, or that the zone coverage doesn't affect player stats. And I've thought for a long time that too high defenses helped tackle coverage or helped tackle production for linebackers. Never had the data to prove it. And then you yourself, John, you generate that data and put it out there, and I thank you for that. That is a tremendous resource for folks, and folks underappreciate that. And it's similar for safeties. You got numbers out there of box safeties and showing that it may not be true in every case, folks, but it averages out to be,
Yeah,
like Tyrann Mathieu, for example, but it averages out to be an added value for a player that's playing close to the line of scrimmage, which only makes sense. Why would a guy playing 25 yards downfield collect a huge number of tackles? The exceptions to the rule, like Minkah Fitzpatrick, where he's collected 122 tackles because he's playing at the back end of a terrible defense and making run defense tackles 15 yards from the line of scrimmage. That's an anomaly. And so I just really love digging into things like that, writing them up. And so I pay the PFF membership and enjoy those stats. So thank you for that.
oh no, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you shutting that out as well. And yeah, it's like there's always outliers, right? But yeah, if we follow the trends and we follow the data, we're going to be right on these players more often than not. And that's as much as I try to do, and I know you do as well. And you write up great stuff over there at Football Guys. So make sure you do go check that out and follow Tripp on the Twitter as well at Dynasty Tripp. As for me, all my 2025 rankings and tiers have hit pff.com now. So that's quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, linebackers, defensive line, and defensive backs, plus a combined offense and IDP 2025 rankings piece. They're all up now on the site. Some of them free, some of them not. I don't make the rules there, but hopefully you'll check them out regardless. And then I'll go through them here on YouTube as well and provide some thoughts and rationale on these 2025 rankings and assets starting next week as well. So you could tune in there if you so please. But that's it for today. Thank you all again for tuning in. And until next time, peace out.